Yesterday morning, my son Ryan's voice trembled with panic as he called, "Mum, why are all the credit cards declined? Dana and I couldn't cover the bill at the restaurant for lunch. People were laughing at us." A strange sense of satisfaction, something I never imagined feeling towards my own child, washed over me. To grasp how I arrived at this moment, I must recount the events of the previous evening, when my daughter in law, Dana, chose to publicly shame me before our entire family. I am 68 years old. For the past several years since my husband passed away, I've essentially become a personal cash dispenser for my son and his wife. Every desire, every craving, every non essential expenditure drained my savings. But yesterday, as I was pouring coffee in my own home, Dana, addressing her friends who were visiting, let slip words that would irrevocably alter our lives. "That old woman," she declared, "is only good for paying our bills." My son Ryan, rather than defending me, erupted in laughter as if he'd just heard the world's funniest jest. I stood there, coffee carafe in hand, witnessing their mockery in my own living room. My hands shook, not from sorrow, but with a chilling rage I had never before experienced. In that instant, I understood something I had long refused to acknowledge. To them, I was not a mother. I was not a mother-in-law. I was not even a person. I was merely a walking, talking bank account. For 10 years, I was their financial savior. When Ryan lost his job, I covered his rent for 8 months, $800 monthly, siphoned from my pension, with no effort from him to secure gainful employment. When Dana decided she needed a complete wardrobe update to appear more professional, it cost me $3,000 on my credit card. And when they fancied a vacation to Hawaii, deeming themselves deserving after a period of stress, another $5,000 vanished from my savings. They never extended an invitation to join them. Naturally, I was deemed suitable enough to fund their enjoyment without my presence. "It's a romantic getaway, Mum," Ryan would explain whenever I hinted at a desire to see the ocean. "You understand, don't you?" And I, like the oblivious fool I had been for so long, always understood. I always paid, I always remained silent, while they lived the opulent life I financed. The final indignity occurred 3 months prior, when Dana declared her need for a new vehicle. "The one we have is getting too old, Georgia," she purred, employing that saccharine tone she reserved for expensive requests. "Besides, if we're going to start a family soon, we need something safer." A $15,000 down payment was required. $15,000, representing 2 years of my careful savings, yet I paid it, as always, for the supposed good of the family. But yesterday, after hearing those venomous words and seeing my own son guffaw at my expense, something within my heart fundamentally shifted. That night, sleep eluded me, not from sadness, but from a burning clarity. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I rose, powered up my computer, and commenced making the decisions I should have enacted years ago. First, I terminated all the supplementary credit cards they had obtained under my name, every single one of the 5 cards they treated as their own. Next, I closed the joint savings account, into which I habitually deposited funds for what were presented as emergencies, but which invariably turned out to be extravagant restaurant bills and designer clothing purchases. I also meticulously changed all the login credentials for my bank accounts and removed their names from my automatic money transfers. By 6 o'clock in the morning, my task complete, I poured myself a cup of coffee and settled into my favorite armchair. For the first time in years, a profound sense of peace settled upon me. I anticipated the inevitable phone call, the desperate, humiliated voice of my son demanding an explanation, and I was prepared to deliver it. The telephone rang precisely at 9:15 in the morning. I was in my kitchen, savoring my second coffee of the day, when Ryan's name illuminated the screen. I allowed it to ring 3 additional times, relishing a fleeting moment of power I hadn't experienced in decades. When I finally answered, his voice was laced with desperation, bordering on hysteria. Mum, why are all the cards declined? I'm at the Crestview Grill with Dana's mother. We were going to have lunch and celebrate her birthday, but none of the cards are working. It's incredibly embarrassing. People are staring at us. The waiter is getting impatient, and I don't have enough cash to cover a $200 bill. What is going on? The irony was exquisite. They had chosen the Crestview Grill, the most exclusive establishment in town, to impress Dana's mother, the very same venue I had never been invited to, despite having financed countless family meals there in their absence. Now they stood there, surrounded by the very high society they so desperately craved to impress, utterly incapable of settling for a single dish. "Good morning, Ryan," I replied, my voice imbued with a calmness that surprised even myself. "The cards have been cancelled because I've decided I will no longer subsidize your lifestyle." "What? Are you insane? We're in public. Dana's mother is here. How am I supposed to explain that my own mother has abandoned me? This is utterly ridiculous." "What's ridiculous, son, is hearing you laugh yesterday when your wife declared I was only good for paying your bills. What's ridiculous is realizing that for 10 years I've been treated like an ATM, not your mother." A prolonged silence stretched across the line. I could discern background voices, likely Dana and her mother, speculating on the unfolding situation. The waiter was undoubtedly waiting for payment, and other patrons were probably beginning to notice the awkward predicament. "Mum, please don't do this right now. We can talk later, but I need you to reactivate the cards. Just for today, I promise." I interrupted him. "No more promises, Ryan. Absolutely no more. Just for today. For 10 years, I've endured the same promises. For 10 years, I've been your convenient solution to every problem. But yesterday, I learned something crucial. You do not respect me. You do not value me. And you certainly do not love me in the way I have loved you." "That's not true. Of course we love you. Dana was just kidding. You know how she is." "I know exactly how she is, Ryan. And I know exactly how you are. That's precisely why I've made this decision." I could hear his labored breathing. I envisioned the escalating tension at the restaurant with each passing minute. His mother-in-law had likely sensed something was amiss, that the coveted gold card he always flaunted wasn't functioning. "Mum, please, we can't just stand here. What do you want us to do? Wash dishes? Should we call the authorities? This is a complete humiliation." "Now you comprehend how I've felt for years," I stated. "The difference is you are 35 years old and should be capable of resolving your own dilemmas. Are you unwell? Are you feeling all right? This isn't like you, Mum. You've never been this cruel." "Cruel?" The word struck me like a physical blow. "Cruel? I, after years of sacrificing, of denying myself simple pleasures? I, who worked until I was 65 to ensure they had a decent inheritance? I, who spent every Christmas alone while they indulged in vacations funded by my gifts?" "Cruel was laughing at me yesterday," I retorted, a frigidity in my voice I hadn't known I possessed. "Cruel was treating me as if I were invisible for years, except when you required funds. Cruel was making me feel that my sole value, as both a mother and a human being, resided in my bank balance." "Mum, Dana didn't mean it that way." Dana articulated precisely what she thought, and you tacitly agreed. You both made it abundantly clear what my position is in your lives. I detected louder voices in the background. Dana inquiring about the situation, her mother making indistinct but clearly annoyed remarks. The waiter had probably presented the bill and was hovering with that strained patience reserved for problematic customers. "Look, Mum, I understand you're upset, but this isn't the appropriate way to handle this. We can sit down and discuss this like adults, but right now I need your assistance. Just this one last time, and then we can set things right. Just this one last time." I let out a laugh, a strange, bitter sound. Do you have any idea how many times I've heard that exact phrase? Do you know how many last times I've financed over the past decade? But Mom, no, Ryan, not this time. This time you'll have to devise another solution. You both have employment. You have friends, you have in-laws. Figure it out. How are we going to explain to Dana's mother that my own mother abandoned us at a restaurant? How will I face the people who know us? Everyone will be talking about this. And there it was, the unvarnished truth. His concern was not for mending our fractured relationship, nor for reflecting on their treatment of me. His sole preoccupation was his own image, his reputation, and what others would perceive, precisely as always. That is your predicament to resolve, son. For years I concerned myself with your image, your comfort, your happiness. Now it is time for me to concern myself with mine. You can't do this. You're my mother. Precisely. I am your mother, not your employee. I am your mother, not your personal bank. I am your mother, not your financial safety net. And as your mother, I should have instilled in you years ago the ability to stand on your own 2 feet. Another, more extended silence ensued. This time I could sense his desperation radiating through the phone. He was likely engaged in frantic mental calculations, contemplating potential contacts, strategizing an escape from this predicament without complete loss of face. Mum, please, Dana is crying. Her mother is questioning what kind of family we are. The waiter has already inquired about our well-being 3 times. Please have mercy. Mercy, another word that sent a tremor through me. Where was their mercy when I spent sleepless nights devising ways to cover their expenses on top of my own? Where was their compassion when I denied myself new clothing to provide them with funds for their fleeting desires? Mercy is earned over years, Ryan, and you two forfeited yours yesterday. I disconnected the call. My hands trembled subtly, not from fear or sorrow, but with a surge of adrenaline, a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in decades. For the first time in years, I had prioritized my own needs. For the first time in years, I had uttered the word no. For the subsequent 30 minutes, my phone remained incessantly active. First, Ryan called again, then Dana, then an unrecognized number which I assumed belonged to Dana's mother. Each unanswered call bolstered my resolve, reinforcing the conviction that I was acting rightly. I poured another coffee and settled onto my patio, embracing the quietude I had so desperately missed. However, the tranquility proved ephemeral. At 11 o'clock in the morning, the distinctive sound of Ryan's car pulling into my driveway reached my ears. The very vehicle I had, of course, helped finance. 2 doors slammed shut, followed by hurried footsteps approaching my front entrance. The knocking commenced immediately, loud and insistent. Mum, open the door. We need to talk. Ryan's voice now carried a different timbre, more desperate, yet also more aggressive. I know you're in there. Your car is in the driveway. I remained immobile, seated on my back patio, concealed from the front entrance, observing the birds frequenting the feeder I had installed the previous year. It was rather amusing how the simpler pleasures in life acquired profound significance when one finally possessed the mental serenity to appreciate them. Georgia. Now it was Dana's voice, sharp and demanding. We know you're in there. Stop acting like a child and come out and face us. Face them as if I were the one who had committed a transgression, as if I were the one accountable for an explanation after years of financial and emotional subjugation. The sheer absurdity of it all almost provoked a chuckle. The knocking intensified. I could hear them now resorting to kicking, not just pounding with their fists. My front door, the sturdy oak portal my late husband had so meticulously installed, was being battered as if it were the entrance to a raucous establishment. This is ridiculous, Dana shrieked. You made us look like beggars in front of everyone. Ryan's mother-in-law had to pay for our lunch, A 70-year-old woman had to dig into her purse because her daughter-in-law is a lunatic. So that was the sequence of events. Dana's mother had been compelled to bail them out. I conjured the scene, Ryan, beads of sweat on his brow, attempting to explain the card malfunctions, Dana fabricating pathetic excuses, and finally the elder woman stepping in to rescue the situation. The humiliation must have been truly exquisite. "Mum, please." Ryan's voice cracked on the verge of tears. "People are already talking. Everyone at the restaurant was staring at us. Some even took out their phones. This is going to be all over social media." Social media, naturally, was their paramount concern, not the fact that they had wounded their mother, not the acknowledgement that they had transgressed a boundary. Their sole focus remained their public image, their standing within those social circles where they revelled in showcasing the lifestyle I had underwritten. The knocking ceased momentarily, but I could discern the furious whispers of their argument. They were undoubtedly strategizing their next maneuver. I knew Dana well enough to anticipate her full repertoire of emotional coercion, and Ryan, over the years, had become a proficient student. "Georgia," Dana's tone shifted dramatically. It now adopted a soft, almost tender quality. "I know you're upset, and you have every right to be. Perhaps what I said yesterday sounded harsh, but you know I didn't truly mean it. I was merely jesting with my friends. You understand how we women are when we gather. Sometimes we speak without considering the implications." It was remarkable to witness her chameleon-like transformation in mere seconds. From the enraged woman who had been shouting and pounding on my door, she had morphed into the understanding daughter-in-law who had simply experienced a minor communication faux pas. "Mom." Now it was Ryan who adopted the gentle approach. "I understand that we have hurt you. Dana has explained the situation from yesterday to me, and you are justified in your distress. However, cancelling the cards doesn't resolve anything. It only exacerbates the problem for everyone. For everyone, naturally, excluding myself. For their comfort, for their continued extravagant lifestyle. My emotional well-being remained conspicuously absent from their calculus. Please, Mum, we can rectify this. We can bring about positive changes." Ryan's voice faltered slightly. "But I require you to reactivate the cards today. I have bills due. The car insurance payment is due tomorrow. And Dana has several doctor's appointments this week. We cannot simply be left without funds, without warning." Without funds, as if the money were their inherent entitlement, as if I were obligated to cover their insurance premiums, their medical appointments, their expenses as independent adults. In that precise moment, I grasped with absolute clarity that they genuinely failed to perceive any distinction between my assets and their own. In their minds, my savings constituted a communal resource, not the tangible outcome of decades of diligent labor and personal sacrifice by a woman who had already fulfilled her obligations in life. "Georgia, please consider the implications of your actions." Dana had shifted her tactics once more. Her voice now conveyed concern, almost maternal solicitude. "What will people think if they discover you have disowned your own son? What will they say at church? What will the family conclude?" The church? The family? It was perpetually the same strategy with her. Leveraging my reputation, my personal connections, my public image as a tool for emotional manipulation. As if my intrinsic worth as an individual were contingent upon external validation. As if my dignity were of lesser importance than the opinions of individuals who likely remained oblivious to the way I was treated within the confines of our private sphere. "Look, Mum." Ryan's tone adopted a more serious, mature demeanour. "Now, I understand that you want us to alter certain aspects. We can discuss boundaries and how to better manage the family's financial affairs. But this is not the appropriate method. This constitutes emotional manipulation." Emotional manipulation. The words resonated within my mind like a stinging reprimand. I was being accused of emotional manipulation after enduring years of subtle coercion, of being made to feel perpetually guilty whenever I hesitated to disperse funds, of them exploiting my maternal affection to deplete my savings. The projection was so patently obvious it almost elicited a sardonic smile. The knocking recommenced, albeit more spaced out, less aggressive. They were beginning to realize that the brute force approach was proving ineffective. I could hear them retreat from the door, likely circling the perimeter of the house, attempting to catch a glimpse of me through a window. "Georgia!" Dana's voice bellowed from what sounded like my side window. "We saw your shadow. We know you're inside. Stop hiding like a coward." Coward! There was the genuine Dana once more, the one who surfaced when her saccharine entreaties failed, the woman who had labelled me that old woman the previous day, who had transformed my generosity into a source of ridicule, who had effectively trained my son to view me as a mere resource, rather than a sentient individual. I rose from my chair and walked deliberately towards the window from which she had shouted. I parted the curtain just enough for her to perceive my presence, and our gazes met through the glass. Her expression instantly transitioned from furious indignation to evident relief, and then contorted into that disingenuous smile I knew so well. "There you are," she exclaimed, feigning delight, as if she had just located a lost child. "Come on, let's open the door and converse as a family." I held her gaze for a considerable moment, experiencing a peculiar sense of tranquility. Then, with deliberate slowness, I drew the curtain closed once more. I heard her shriek of utter frustration, followed by renewed pounding on the window pane, but this time I remained unfazed. I returned to my patio and resumed my seat. My phone immediately began to ring, but I silenced it. For the first time in years, my home truly felt like my own sanctuary. The shouting and banging persisted for another hour, gradually diminishing in intensity. From my secluded back patio, I could discern fragmented snippets of their increasingly desperate conversations, their frantic schemes to sway my decision. Dana proposed enlisting a locksmith to force entry, but Ryan cautioned her against such an action, reminding her it would constitute breaking and entering. Even in their desperation, they seemed reluctant to court genuine legal repercussions. Finally, I heard the distinct sound of car doors closing and the engine revving as they drove away. However, I understood with absolute certainty that this ordeal was far from concluded. I knew Dana well enough to predict that she was already formulating her next strategic move, likely one involving more elaborate emotional manipulation. My premonition proved accurate. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone began to chime with calls from unknown numbers. Initially, it was Dana's mother, her voice polite yet firm. "Georgia, my dear, I believe there has been a significant misunderstanding. Dana has recounted the events to me, and I am confident we can resolve this situation amicably as civilized adults." I terminated the call without engaging. Subsequently, it was my sister Elaine, who resides in a different state, and had evidently received a highly curated, heavily edited version of the proceedings. "Georgia, Ryan contacted me. Quite distraught, he mentioned you are behaving unusually and that you left them stranded at a restaurant. Are you feeling unwell?" "I am perfectly well, Elaine," I responded. "In fact, I feel better than ever. However, I confess I am perplexed. Ryan stated that you cancelled all their credit cards without any prior notification. That hardly sounds like the Georgia I know. You have always been remarkably generous with your family." "Perhaps that was the very issue," I suggested. "Perhaps I was excessively generous for an extended period." "But Georgia, they are your family. Dana asserts that you are punishing them for an innocent jest. Surely you can convene and address this matter." An innocent jest. It was astonishing how Dana had managed to rewrite history within a mere handful of hours. What had transpired as a cruel humiliation in the presence of guests had now been artfully reframed as a harmless jest that I had, apparently, misinterpreted due to excessive sensitivity. Elaine, have you ever experienced the sensation of being an ATM for your children? I inquired directly. What? No, why do you ask? Because that, precisely, is my role in the lives of Ryan and Dana, and yesterday I finally came to that realization. Georgia, you are exaggerating. Parents invariably assist their offspring. It is a natural inclination. Is it natural to subsidize your adult son's rent for years on end? Is it normal to finance their lavish vacations while you remain solitary at home? Is it acceptable for them to ridicule you for your very generosity? Elaine paused for a moment. Well, perhaps they have exploited your generosity to a degree, but severing all ties so abruptly seems rather extreme. Do you know what is extreme, Elaine? Working until you're 65 to ensure a substantial financial legacy for your offspring, only to discover they are already squandering it while you still draw breath. Following that particular exchange, I made the decision to disconnect the landline. My mobile device was subsequently placed into airplane mode. I required absolute quiet to process the multitude of emotions swirling within me and to formulate a strategy for my path forward. That very evening, as I prepared a meal for myself, the first in a considerable duration, free from the gnawing apprehension of awaiting calls or requests for funds, a profound realization dawned. I experienced no remorse. My entire existence had been conditioned to engender guilt whenever I failed to fulfill the expectations of others, particularly my kin. Yet, on this occasion, that pervasive sense of culpability was conspicuously absent. Instead, I encountered an emotion I hadn't felt for an extended period: mental clarity. It was as if I had been navigating through a dense emotional fog, and suddenly the mist had parted, allowing me to perceive with unclouded vision. Every choice I had made over the preceding decade replayed in my mind with the swiftness of a cinematic reel, and I could discern patterns that I had previously been unwilling to confront. The sequence of events invariably followed the same predictable course. Either Ryan or Dana would approach me with a pressing, albeit temporary, financial predicament. Initially, I would express reservations. They would then escalate their efforts, employing emotional leverage. Phrases like, "it's just this once, we're in dire straits, and what will people say," would be deployed. Eventually, I would yield. They would resolve their immediate monetary crisis. And then, a few weeks later, a new, equally transient problem would emerge. There was never a genuine plan for repayment, never a sincere acknowledgement of the sacrifices I had made, and certainly no invitation to partake in the benefits of my own liberality. I funded their getaways, yet received no invitation to join. I financed their elaborate dining experiences while I dined in solitude. I covered their medical expenditures, but my own well-being was never a subject of inquiry. I rose and proceeded to my study, where I kept all my financial records. It was imperative to conduct a thorough assessment to ascertain the precise extent of my financial contributions to them over the years. I retrieved my bank statements from the past 5 years and commenced the meticulous task of calculation. The resulting figure was disheartening: $86,000. That sum represented a mere 5-year span. This figure did not even encompass the preceding years for which I had maintained less detailed records. It amounted to more than half of my total pension, exceeding the earnings of many individuals over a 2-year period. However, the most agonizing aspect was not the monetary sum itself. It was the dawning comprehension that, in exchange for those $86,000, I had been subjected to derision, apathy, and the treatment one affords an obligation rather than a cherished blessing. As I scrutinized the figures, I unearthed a revelation that ignited a firestorm of indignation. They had been utilizing one of my credit cards for premium streaming subscriptions, costly gym memberships, and periodical publications I wasn't even aware existed. These were minor monthly charges that collectively amounted to hundreds of dollars annually. Funds that were automatically debited from my account to subsidize luxuries I never availed myself of. That night, I arrived at another significant resolution. I retrieved my will from the filing cabinet and perused it with careful attention. I had prepared that document 5 years prior, when I still harbored the belief that I was safeguarding the future of a devoted and appreciative family. Ryan was designated as the sole beneficiary of my entire estate, the home, savings, investments, everything. However, I now viewed that will through a markedly different lens. Why should I bequeath my entire estate to an individual who had already depleted more than half of it while I was still alive? Why should I reward someone with an inheritance who had treated me as a mere financial resource rather than a maternal figure? I determined that the following day I would contact my attorney to schedule an appointment. The time had come to implement substantial modifications to my estate planning. If Ryan wished to treat me as a financial institution, then he would have to be content with the interest generated, not the principal itself. I retired to bed that night with a peculiar yet profoundly liberating sensation. For the first time in years, my decisions were guided solely by my own welfare. For the first time in years, I had not spent my nights worrying about the financial tribulations of other adults. I slept more soundly than I had in months. The ensuing day, I awoke with an energy that had eluded me for years. It was Friday, and for the first time in a considerable while, I had made plans that did not involve rectifying someone else's shortcomings. My initial action would be to contact my lawyer. Subsequently, I would visit the bank to effectuate further adjustments, and perhaps, just perhaps, I would indulge myself with a small purchase, utilizing funds I would have otherwise allocated to someone else's fleeting desires. I reconnected the house phone while preparing breakfast. As anticipated, there were 14 messages on the answering machine. I listened to them while sipping my coffee, and each one served to validate the righteousness of my decision. Message 1 from Dana, her voice tinged with distress. Georgia, it's Dana. I know you're displeased, but please consider the ramifications of your actions. Ryan hasn't slept a wink all night. He's deeply concerned about you. He claims he's never witnessed you in this state. Kindly return our call. Message 2. Ryan's voice etched with desperation. Mom, I must speak with you. I visited the bank this morning and was informed that you'd closed the account where you deposited funds for our emergencies. Why would you do that? That account was intended for both of us. It was quite remarkable how he consistently referred to my funds as belonging to us both. That account had never been intended for shared access. It contained my money, which I had deposited to address their supposed emergencies that invariably materialized as vacations, extravagant attire, or dining excursions. Message 3, Elaine again. Georgia, Ryan contacted me once more. He mentioned that you've also closed a savings account. Are you absolutely certain about your course of action? Don't you believe you're perhaps being a trifle extreme? The subsequent messages followed a similar cadence. Feigned concern, questioning my mental faculties, and pleas artfully disguised as sisterly counsel. However, message number 11 captured my immediate attention. It originated from an unfamiliar number, yet the voice was recognizable. Mrs. Whitlock, this is Oscar, Dana's husband. Look, we may not know each other intimately, but Dana asked me to reach out. She's quite worried, as she perceives you're behaving rather unusually. Speaking as a man, I believe women sometimes overcomplicate matters unnecessarily. Why not simply offer forgiveness and let bygones be bygones? Family is paramount. Family is the most important thing. What a convenient tenet, I mused, when it served to preserve a status quo that primarily benefited them. I wondered if Oscar would be so amenable to the philosophy of forgiveness and forgetting if he was subjected to ridicule in front of his own family, while simultaneously having his bank account depleted. Precisely at 9 o'clock, I contacted the law firm where my will had been executed. The receptionist informed me that Mr. Coleman had an unexpected opening and could accommodate me that very afternoon at 2 o'clock. Perfect. I then called the bank and requested an appointment with the manager to review all my accounts and implement additional security protocols. My objective was also to ensure that Ryan had no residual access to any information regarding my financial standing. As I was preparing to depart, the doorbell chimed. For a fleeting moment, I anticipated the arrival of Ryan and Dana once more. However, upon peering through the peephole, I observed my neighbor Lucy standing on the porch. Lucy, a woman in her early 60s, had been widowed 2 years prior, and we occasionally exchanged pleasantries over the garden fence. I opened the door with a degree of curiosity. Lucy had never made a formal visit before. "Good morning, Georgia." She greeted me with a warm smile. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I heard quite a bit of commotion and raised voices yesterday, and I wanted to ensure you were all right." I invited her inside and offered her coffee. It was a welcome respite to have someone in my home who wasn't seeking financial assistance or attempting emotional manipulation. "Is everything in order?" she inquired, her concern palpable. "Yesterday I observed your son and his wife here for an extended period, engaged in shouting and banging on the door. I was on the verge of contacting the authorities." I recounted the entirety of the situation, omitting the most intimate details, but providing sufficient context for her to grasp the predicament. Lucy listened attentively, interjecting occasional nods and expressions of comprehension. "Georgia," she stated once I had concluded, "I must confess something. For years I've observed the manner in which they treat you during their visits. I've seen them arrive in brand new vehicles, adorned in fashionable attire, conversing on the latest mobile devices. Meanwhile, you continue to drive the same automobile from a decade ago and frequent discount establishments." Her words resonated deeply, serving as external validation for something I had been internally disavowing. Others could perceive the evident reality that I had stubbornly refused to acknowledge. "But what has struck me most profoundly," Lucy continued, "is that I've never witnessed them extend any form of assistance to you. I've never seen them help you with your groceries, undertake repairs around your home, or simply visit without the underlying motive of requesting something." "Is it that apparent?" I inquired, experiencing a complex admixture of shame and relief. "To an external observer, unequivocally so. However, I comprehend why you may have struggled to perceive it. When one is a mother, the inherent desire is to believe the absolute best of one's offspring." Lucy remained for another hour, and our conversation proved to be the most candid and liberating I had experienced in months. She shared her own accounts of dealing with adult children who harbored the expectation that she would resolve all their predicaments, and how she had eventually learned to establish boundaries following her widowhood. "Do you know what aided me the most?" she asked as she prepared to depart. "The realization that being an exemplary mother does not necessitate martyrdom. One can cherish their children without sacrificing one's own dignity on their behalf." Her words echoed in my mind throughout my journey to the bank. In the manager's office, we systematically reviewed all my accounts and implemented a series of enhanced security measures. I proceeded to update all passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, and ensured that I was the sole individual with authorized access to any of my financial information. "Mrs. Whitlock," the manager remarked as he finalized the modifications, May I inquire as to the impetus behind these significant changes? Are you experiencing any specific security concerns? Let's just say, I replied, that I've finally recognized that my most substantial financial risk resides within my own family. The manager offered a knowing nod. Ma'am, it's more prevalent than you might imagine. We encounter numerous instances of elderly individuals being financially exploited by their relatives. You have acted wisely by safeguarding yourself. Following my visit to the bank, I treated myself to lunch at a quaint, intimate eatery I had long wished to patronize, but had never permitted myself the indulgence. I selected the most opulent item on the menu, accompanied by a glass of wine and dessert. The total bill amounted to $45, a sum less than what Ryan and Dana typically expended on a single round of beverages during their evening outings. As I savored each mouthful, a significant understanding surfaced. It had been years since I had enjoyed a meal without the constant undercurrent of anxiety. Mentally calculating the cost, assessing whether I needed to reserve funds for Ryan's next unforeseen crisis, or questioning if I could even afford this modest personal pleasure. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was dining with genuine appetite and unadulterated enjoyment. My appointment with Mr. Coleman, the lawyer, proved to be revealing in ways I had not anticipated. When I elucidated the situation and expressed my intention to revise my will, he displayed no discernible surprise. On the contrary, he informed me that cases similar to mine were far more commonplace than I could have imagined. Mrs. Whitlock, he stated as he examined my current testament, I see this document was prepared 5 years ago. At that juncture, you designated your entire estate to your son, Ryan. Are you unequivocally certain you wish to enact substantial alterations? Completely certain, I affirmed. Over these past 5 years, I have gained a clear understanding of my son's true character. He has demonstrated a distinct lack of appreciation for my generosity, and frankly, he has already expended more than half of what would have constituted his inheritance while I am still living. The lawyer diligently took notes as I detailed the $86,000 I had meticulously documented, excluding prior years' expenditures. His eyebrows arched subtly upon hearing the figure. I comprehend your position entirely, he remarked. What specific modifications are you contemplating? I intend to divide my estate, I declared. A portion will be allocated to charitable organizations that genuinely assist individuals in need, rather than to capricious adults. Another segment will be designated for my sister Elaine, who has consistently maintained her independence and has never solicited anything from me. And as for Ryan, I paused. For Ryan, I wish to allocate just enough to signify that I have not disinherited him out of malice, but not so much that he can continue to subsist without engaging in gainful employment. Are you envisioning a particular percentage breakdown? He inquired. 50% for charitable causes, 30% for my sister, and 20% for Ryan, with the explicit stipulation that he can only receive his share if he can demonstrate a full year of complete financial self-sufficiency. The lawyer offered a faint smile. That final condition is indeed intriguing and entirely legally sound. You are, in essence, providing an incentive for personal accountability. I departed the law firm enveloped in a profound sense of fulfillment. For the first time in years, I had made decisions concerning my future that authentically reflected my core values, rather than being dictated by my anxieties or maternal guilt. Upon my arrival home, I noticed an unfamiliar vehicle parked in my driveway. An elegantly attired older woman stood on my porch. It was Claudia, Dana's mother. "Georgia," she said, her smile strained as she observed my approach. "It's good you're here. We need to have a candid conversation, woman to woman." I invited her inside, driven more by curiosity than by any sense of obligation. I was keen to ascertain the narrative she had received. "Look, dear," Claudia began once we were seated. "I understand there was a bit of a misunderstanding yesterday between you and the children. Dana has relayed the entire situation to me, and frankly, I believe you're overreacting." "Overreacting?" I echoed. "Well, yes. Dana mentioned she made a comment that you misinterpreted, and now you've taken such drastic measures. Cancelling your own son's credit cards. That seems like an exceptionally severe reaction to a simple jest between women." A simple jest between women. It was quite remarkable how the narrative had undergone such a transformation. Now, it wasn't merely an innocent quip, but somehow it was also my failing for lacking a sense of humour. "Claudia," I stated calmly, "do you provide your daughter with unlimited credit cards?" "No." "And do you cover your adult daughter's rent?" "No, but that's a different situation." "Do you finance your daughter's vacations while you remain at home by yourself?" Claudia shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Georgia, every family manages its finances in its own unique way." "Precisely, and I've opted to manage mine differently henceforth." "But consider Dana and Ryan," she implored. "They are young, they are in the process of building their futures, they require support." "They are 35 and 32 years of age, respectively. At that juncture in my life, I had already raised a son, worked diligently for many years, and accumulated savings for my retirement without any financial assistance from my parents. Times have indeed evolved. That is accurate. Currently, there are increased opportunities, enhanced educational avenues, and greater accessibility to financial loans. There is absolutely no justifiable reason why two educated adults cannot independently sustain themselves." Claudia shifted her approach. "Georgia, Dana is profoundly distressed. She wept throughout the entire night yesterday. She claims she has always regarded you as a surrogate mother and cannot comprehend why you are suddenly rejecting her. A surrogate mother who, according to her own words, is only valuable for settling bills." That was a jest. Women frequently complain about their mothers-in-law. It's a common occurrence. Expressing grievances in private is one matter, Claudia. Publicly humiliating someone in the presence of guests is an entirely different proposition. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, during which Claudia employed every manipulative tactic at her disposal. Guilt. "Think about how your son must be feeling." Fear, "You'll end up utterly alone." Shame, "What will people say?" and even veiled threats. Dana has connections within social services. Finally, realizing the ineffectiveness of her current strategy, she adopted a more direct approach. "Georgia, I will be candid with you. Dana and Ryan are contemplating seeking legal counsel. There are mechanisms in place to declare an individual mentally incapacitated if they exhibit erratic financial behavior." And there it was, the true menace concealed beneath layers of emotional manipulation. If I did not acquiesce willingly, they would resort to legal means to seize control of my finances by force. "Claudia," I stated, rising to my feet, "I strongly advise you to consult with a competent attorney before contemplating such a course of action. I have just concluded an appointment with my own legal representative, and he assured me that an individual who safeguards their finances from familial exploitation is demonstrably exhibiting sound mental faculties, not the contrary." Her expression underwent an immediate transformation. She realized she had revealed her hand prematurely. "I didn't intend—" She began to backtrack. "Yes, you did intend precisely that," I interjected. "And now that I am privy to your actual intentions, I believe this discussion has reached its conclusion." I accompanied her to the door in silence. Before her departure, she uttered, "Georgia, I sincerely hope you will reconsider. A familial conflict benefits no one." There is no conflict, Claudia. There is merely a woman who has finally learned to value her own worth. After she departed, I settled into my living room and contemplated the recent exchange. Not only were they planning to intensify their emotional manipulation, but they were also contemplating legal recourse to regain dominion over my assets. That evening, I contacted Mr. Coleman and informed him of Claudia's threat. He provided reassurance, explaining that declaring someone mentally incompetent necessitates robust medical evidence and a protracted legal process. Engaging in responsible management of one's personal finances does not constitute evidence of incompetence. However, he cautioned, I highly recommend that you meticulously document every interaction, record conversations whenever feasible, maintain a record of their threats, and consider undergoing a preventative psychological evaluation to secure documentation of your mental lucidity. That night, for the first time since this ordeal commenced, a tremor of apprehension coursed through me. Yet it was not a fear of having erred. It was a dread concerning the lengths to which they might go to reassert control over my financial resources. But superimposed upon that apprehension was a more potent emotion: determination. Claudia's threat kept me awake that night, not from fear, but from a cold, seething rage that intensified with each passing hour. How dare they contemplate the notion of declaring me mentally unsound for the mere act of protecting my own funds? It represented the ultimate form of manipulation. If persuasion fails, attempt to strip the individual of their legal prerogative to govern their own existence. The following day, Saturday, I adhered to Mr. Coleman's counsel. Initially, I visited a private clinic where I underwent a comprehensive psychological evaluation. The physician, a professional woman in her 50s, listened intently as I articulated the circumstances. Mrs. Whitlock, she stated after 2 hours of tests and interviews, let me be unequivocally clear. You are exhibiting exceptional mental acuity. Recognizing patterns of abuse, establishing healthy boundaries, and safeguarding your financial assets are all indicative of a mind that is entirely competent. In fact, I would venture to say that your current actions are far more rational than when you were permitting financial exploitation. She provided me with an official report detailing my complete mental competence, duly dated and sealed. It served as my safeguard against any potential future legal challenges. Upon my return home, I found Lucy diligently tending to her garden. She approached the fence delineating our properties, her expression one of evident concern. Georgia, she began, an older woman visited yesterday inquiring about you. She wanted to know if you had been behaving unusually lately. I informed her that you appeared happier and more relaxed than ever before. I recounted the details of Claudia's visit and her thinly veiled threat. Lucy listened, her indignation growing. That's simply unbelievable, she exclaimed. Attempting to have you declared incompetent for refusing to relinquish your wealth is the most preposterous notion I have ever encountered. What troubles me most, I admitted, is their genuine conviction that they are entitled to my money. They do not perceive it as my estate. They view it as their inheritance prepaid. You know what you need, Lucy said, a mischievous glint in her eye. You need to get out there and relish your newfound freedom. When was the last time you did something solely for your own pleasure? She was entirely correct. I had spent so many years living according to the requirements and demands of others that I had forgotten the sensation of undertaking an activity purely for personal enjoyment. There's a 5-day cruise departing next Wednesday, Lucy continued. I was originally scheduled to accompany my sister, but she had to withdraw due to health complications. Would you care to join me? The prospect immediately ignited my enthusiasm. When had I last embarked on a journey for leisure? When had I last slept in a bed other than my own, or dined in a restaurant without meticulously calculating the expense. I could finally breathe freely, unburdened by the constant dread of another financial emergency surfacing with Ryan. The thought of it brought a smile to my face. I'd love that, I responded without a moment's hesitation. Later that afternoon, we finalized the booking for the cruise. It was priced at $1,500 per person for a 5-day all-inclusive voyage. This was a mere fraction of what I had previously allocated for Ryan and Dana's last holiday. However, this time, the expenditure would be solely for my own pleasure and rejuvenation. On Sunday morning, as I was contemplating which outfits to pack for my upcoming trip, the doorbell chimed. It was Ryan arriving alone this time. He looked utterly worn down. Pronounced dark shadows clung to the skin beneath his eyes. His attire was rumpled, and his expression was one of sheer desperation. "Mom," he began, his voice cracking with emotion. "Please, we need to talk. Just you and me, without Dana, without any shouting." I granted him entry, but I consciously maintained an emotional distance. I had become adept at recognizing the familiar signs of manipulation. "Mom, I'm in a desperate situation," he confessed, his words tumbling out. "The car insurance is due on Monday, and I don't have the funds to cover it. If I don't renew it, I won't be legally permitted to drive, and without a car, I can't get to my job." "How much is the insurance?" I inquired, my tone calm. $250, he replied. "And how much did you earn last month?" I pressed. $3,500, he admitted. But what, Ryan?" I prodded gently. "But we have expenses. The rent, food, utilities, and what else do you spend money on?" He fell silent for a moment, clearly struggling to formulate a response. "Mum, don't you understand? Life itself is costly." "Life is costly when you maintain a lifestyle you cannot truly afford," I countered. "Tell me, son, one thing. How much did you spend on dining out last month?" "I don't know, perhaps." "And how much do you allocate to streaming subscriptions, gym memberships, and food delivery applications?" "That's different, Mum. Those are essential needs." "Streaming services are essential needs?" I echoed, a disbelieving laugh escaping my lips. "In today's world, perhaps you can't live like a complete recluse, but therein lies the fundamental issue. Ryan genuinely believes that luxuries are necessities, while actual necessities are someone else's responsibility." I continued, my voice steady. "Ryan, you are 35 years old. You possess a college education and hold down a job. Why is it that you cannot manage to pay a $250 car insurance bill?" "Because there's no money left after everything else," he explained. "Then cut back on everything else." "It's not that simple. You can't just eliminate expenses so readily." "Why not? Why?" His frustration was palpable. "Because we have a life to maintain, a life that you, frankly, cannot afford. But you've always been there to bail us out." And there it was, the unvarnished truth. He wasn't seeking temporary assistance. He was asserting what he perceived as his inherent right. In his mind, I was an integral, permanent component of his financial infrastructure, not a mother who offered support on occasion. "Ryan," I began, my voice measured, "I'm going to ask you something, and I expect an honest answer. In the past 10 years, have you ever created a realistic budget and genuinely attempted to live solely on your income?" He remained silent. "Have you ever seriously considered relocating to a more affordable apartment?" More silence. "Have you ever voluntarily reduced your spending to avoid needing to ask me for funds?" "Mum, those are unfair questions." "Unfair? Is it unfair to ask a grown man of 35 if he's tried to live within his means? You don't grasp the pressure we're under. Dana has certain expectations. Her friends live a particular way. We can't appear to be struggling. And when, precisely, did you ever consider that my own expectations or my financial pressures might matter?" For the first time in our entire exchange, Ryan was utterly quiet. I could see in his eyes that he was processing a concept he had never before entertained. "Mum," he finally murmured, his voice softer now. "I never considered that. I didn't know you felt pressured." "Really? You never stopped to wonder how I managed to finance your lifestyle while I was subsisting on beans and rice? You never questioned why I never bought new clothes for myself, yet always seemed to have money readily available for your emergencies?" Tears began to stream down his face. I thought you enjoyed helping us. I thought it was your way of expressing love." "And it was, Ryan, but you transformed my love into an obligation. You turned my generosity into an expectation, and ultimately, you twisted my sacrifice into a justification for mockery." "Mum, what Dana said was the final straw, but the glass had been overflowing for years." Ryan wept silently for several minutes. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded different, imbued with a newfound maturity. "What can I do to rectify this? You can start by paying for your own car insurance." Ryan remained seated in my living room for nearly an hour following our conversation. We spoke very little, but I observed a distinct shift in his demeanor. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he appeared to be genuinely contemplating his behavior, rather than solely strategizing how to obtain what he desired. As he finally prepared to depart, he said, "Mum, I'm going to find a way to cover the insurance, and we're going to have a serious discussion about our spending habits." I harbored no illusions that this would be an instant transformation, but it certainly sounded like a nascent step towards genuine adulthood. On Monday morning, as I was finalizing my packing for the cruise scheduled for Wednesday, my phone rang with an unexpected caller. It was Dana, but her tone was remarkably different from the acrimonious exchanges of the preceding days. "Georgia," she began, her voice remarkably calm, "I'm aware that things have been strained between us. Would you be open to meeting for coffee? Just the two of us, without Ryan or any further drama?" Curiosity outweighed any real hope of immediate reconciliation, so I agreed. We met at a quaint coffee shop nestled near the mall. Dana arrived dressed more understatedly than usual, eschewing the ostentatious jewelry and designer apparel she typically favored. She looked fatigued, but there was a discernible humility about her. "Georgia," she started once our coffees had been served, "I want to offer you my sincerest apologies for my words last week. They were cruel, disrespectful, and utterly inappropriate." "What prompted this change of heart?" I inquired directly. Honestly, the humiliation at the restaurant was a significant factor, but it wasn't solely that. Over these past few days, I've been forced to confront the stark reality of our financial situation without your consistent support, and I've come to a terrifying realization. And what was that realization? That we have absolutely no clue how to live within our means. We've been living for years as though we were affluent, simply because you bridged the gap between our income and our expenditures. This was the first instance I could recall of Dana offering such an honest assessment of their financial predicament. "Yesterday," she continued, "Ryan and I sat down and meticulously crafted a genuine budget, utilizing only our combined salaries without any external assistance. Do you know what we discovered?" "Please tell me." "That we spend almost double what we actually earn. Double, Georgia. Not a little over, but precisely double. And you consistently absorb the difference." "And what steps do you intend to take now?" "We're going to have to implement some drastic changes. The apartment we currently reside in costs $1,200 monthly. With our combined salaries, we should ideally be allocating no more than $800 for rent. We're going to have to relocate." "And is Ryan in agreement with this decision?" "He was initially resistant. However, once he actually saw the figures laid out on paper, he had no other viable option." We'll also need to discontinue various memberships and services and fundamentally alter our approach to socializing. Dana paused, taking a deliberate sip of her coffee. Georgia, I need to ask you something, and I implore you to be completely honest with me. When did you first begin to feel resentment towards our financial reliance on you? The question, delivered with such directness, caught me by surprise. I believe the resentment developed gradually, but it solidified into a clear sentiment when I realized that you not only expected my assistance, but had also grown to take it for granted. And when did that happen? When you ceased to formally request funds and simply began to utilize them. When the additional credit cards became a commonplace occurrence. When my savings account transformed into your de facto emergency fund. Dana nodded slowly, her expression etched with shame. You are absolutely correct. At some point, we stopped perceiving you as a person offering us assistance and began to view you as a resource. Precisely. Is there any possibility of rebuilding our relationship? Dana inquired, her voice laced with a hint of desperation. I will be completely candid with you, Dana. The relationship we once shared is irrevocably gone. That dynamic was predicated on an unsustainable paradigm where my role was to give and yours was to take. If we are to construct something new, it must be founded upon entirely different principles. What kind of foundations are you envisioning? Mutual respect, your genuine financial independence, and a relationship where my value is not contingent upon my economic utility. Dana remained silent for a prolonged moment. Does that imply you will never offer us assistance again? It means that if you were to require true help in a genuine emergency, after you have demonstrably proven your ability to live responsibly on your own, we could potentially consider it. However, that would be assistance, not a perpetual subsidy. How long would we need to demonstrate our independence? It's not a test with a defined deadline, Dana. It represents a fundamental shift in your lifestyle. If you can maintain a balanced budget, live within your financial means, and diligently build your own savings for emergencies, then you will have unequivocally displayed true financial maturity. And as for your indulgences, such as vacations and elaborate dinners at expensive restaurants, those are experiences you will need to earn through your own hard work, much like the majority of people do. Dana's expression conveyed a palpable sense of being overwhelmed. Georgia, I'm not entirely convinced we possess the knowledge of how to live in such a manner. Then it is high time you acquired that knowledge. You have education, employment, and innate abilities. The sole element you have demonstrably lacked is the intrinsic motivation to achieve independence. If you falter, then you will have failed as responsible adults, learning from your mistakes. However, at the very least, you will have failed as individuals who are masters of their own choices, rather than perpetually relying on someone else to resolve your difficulties. We concluded our coffees in a contemplative quietude. As we rose to depart, Dana remarked, Georgia, I understand this doesn't magically resolve everything, but I want you to know that I've learned a profound lesson this past week. And what is that lesson? That being an adult isn't merely about reaching a certain age, it's about embracing adult responsibilities. And we've been merely playing at being adults while you shouldered the true burdens. This was, without question, the most mature reflection I had ever heard from her. That evening, as I completed the final arrangements for my cruise, a profound sense of peace settled over me. I hadn't lost my family. Rather, I had finally extricated myself from a toxic dynamic that was detrimental to all of us. If Ryan and Dana genuinely aspired to change, their actions would need to substantiate their words. On Tuesday, a text message arrived from Ryan. Mum, I secured a personal loan to cover the car insurance. I've also identified a more affordable apartment. We're scheduled to move next month. I wanted you to be aware." It was a small gesture, perhaps, but it represented a significant stride towards the independence they so desperately needed. That night I slept soundly, secure in the knowledge that the following day would mark the commencement of my first truly personal adventure in decades. The cruise proved to be a revelation. For 5 days I awakened at my leisure, indulged in whatever culinary desires struck my fancy, and engaged in activities purely for the joy they brought me. Lucy proved to be an exceptional travel companion, independent, delightful, and blessedly free from any family drama. Aboard the ship, I connected with other women my age who had navigated remarkably similar experiences. During one memorable dinner, a woman named Elaine recounted how her 3 adult children had systematically depleted her retirement savings before she finally mustered the resolve to declare, "Enough is enough." Another woman, Isabel, shared the shocking discovery that her son had been illicitly using her credit card for online gambling. "What surprised me the most," Isabel confessed as we gazed at the breathtaking sunset from the deck, "was the realization that I wasn't alone in this. I truly believed it was a problem unique to my family. But it turns out there's an entire generation of parents who simply haven't learned how to say no to their grown children." Upon my return home on Sunday, I felt utterly revitalized. 5 days had passed without a single phone call soliciting money, without the gnawing anxiety of financial worries, and without the perpetual burden of resolving other people's predicaments. It felt akin to rediscovering my identity before I had become the family's unofficial financial institution. Several messages awaited me on my answering machine, but to my astonishment, none of them constituted a desperate plea for funds. Ryan had called twice simply to ascertain if I had arrived home safely from my travels. Dana had left a brief, cordial message. "I hope you thoroughly enjoyed your cruise. We would be delighted to hear about your experiences when you have a moment." On Monday morning, Lucy arrived with coffee and pastries, eager to hear every detail of my voyage. As we conversed on my patio, I observed Ryan's car pull into my driveway. However, this time, instead of disembarking immediately and heading towards my door, he remained in the vehicle for several minutes. When he finally rang the doorbell, his expression was noticeably different. He appeared apprehensive, yet also exuded a newfound sense of maturity. "Mom," he stated when I opened the door, "I know you've just returned from your trip, but could we perhaps talk for a brief moment?" I invited him inside. Lucy, with her customary discretion, excused herself and returned to her own home. "Mom," Ryan began, "I wanted to share what Dana and I have been undertaking this past week. We've moved into a smaller apartment. We're now paying $400 less in rent each month." "And how do you feel about this change?" I inquired. Honestly, it was challenging at first. The apartment is more compact, and it's situated in a less fashionable neighborhood, but after a few days I came to a significant realization. And what was that realization? That I can now sleep peacefully at night, knowing that we are covering all our expenses with our own earnings. I no longer experience that pervasive anxiety of not knowing how we'll manage to meet next month's obligations. This was the very first instance I had ever heard Ryan articulate feelings of financial anxiety from his own perspective. It had never occurred to me that he too might have been under considerable stress due to the unsustainable nature of his chosen lifestyle. We've also cancelled those expensive gym memberships and subscribed to a basic one that costs a fifth of the previous price, he continued, and Dana has secured a part-time position on weekends to generate additional income. Dana is working more? Yes, and it was entirely her own idea. She expressed a desire to contribute more actively to our finances rather than simply managing funds that originate from elsewhere. I was genuinely surprised to hear that Dana had taken such a proactive initiative. Mum, I also wanted to offer a formal apology, not just for the incident 2 weeks ago, but for all these intervening years. I never truly comprehended that I was treating you like an ATM rather than my mother. And what prompted this realization? When we had to construct our first genuine budget, I suddenly understood that I had no concept of what it truly costs to live. My entire adult life, I had been living beyond my means because you consistently absorbed the deficit. Ryan paused, his gaze meeting mine directly. Mum, I want you to understand that these past few days have been the first in years where I have genuinely felt like an adult, making my own decisions, resolving my own challenges, and being accountable for my own repercussions. And how does that feel? Terrifying, yet profoundly liberating. I hadn't realized the sheer weight I was carrying until I finally shed it. The weight of knowing deep down that I wasn't truly independent. The weight of acknowledging that I was perpetuating a financial falsehood. The weight of understanding that my lifestyle was fundamentally dependent on exploiting my mother's boundless generosity. Those words resonated deeply within me. For years I had believed myself to be the sole bearer of suffering within that dynamic. However, it became apparent that Ryan had also been burdened by guilt and a pervasive sense of anxiety. Mum, I realize I have absolutely no right to ask anything of you after everything that has transpired, but there is one thing I would dearly love to request. Please tell me, do you believe it's possible for us to ever establish a normal relationship? A relationship where I am simply your son, visiting you because I cherish your company, not because I require something from you? This question moved me profoundly, as it implied a genuine understanding of the distinction. Ryan, that kind of relationship can commence today if you truly desire it. I have always longed for a son who visits me out of genuine affection, not because I possess some form of utility. So would you welcome Dana and me for lunch this Sunday? We'll bring the provisions, we'll handle the cooking, and we'll simply spend time together. I would absolutely love that. After Ryan departed, I sat in my living room, reflecting on the monumental shifts that had occurred in a mere 2 weeks. I had relinquished my role as the family's financial savior, but in doing so, I had gained something far more valuable: my self-respect and the nascent possibility of a genuine, authentic relationship with my son. That night, I contacted Mr. Coleman to discuss revising my will once more. Following my conversation with Ryan, I felt compelled to consider a different approach. Instead of imposing permanent punitive measures, I decided to craft a will that would actively reward demonstrated maturity over time. Miss Whitlock, the lawyer observed, you are contemplating a tiered will based on behavioral progression, is that correct? Precisely. If Ryan exhibits consistent, genuine financial independence for 2 consecutive years, he will be entitled to a larger inheritance. Should he maintain that pattern for 5 years, another even larger portion will be allocated. However, if he reverts to his former habits, we will revert to the original distribution plan. That is an exceptionally intelligent structure. It actively incentivizes long-term personal growth. As I concluded the phone call, I realized that for the first time in countless years, I was envisioning my future based on hope rather than an ever-present fear. Hope that my son had truly learned and evolved. Hope that our fractured relationship could indeed be healed. Hope that my final years would be lived with dignity and an unwavering sense of respect. I stepped out onto my patio and gazed up at the star-studded sky. In the distance, I could faintly hear the soothing murmur of the fountain I had installed in my garden the previous year. It was a small indulgence, a luxury I had permitted myself only after years of internal debate and doubt, regarding whether I truly deserved to allocate funds for my own personal enjoyment. Now I unequivocally knew the answer. I had always deserved to treat myself with the same boundless generosity I had extended to others. It had taken me 68 long years to internalize that profound lesson, but I had finally learned it, and I vowed never to forget it again.